I believe China's nuclear force will continue to grow. Then to what extent? My answer is very simple. To the extent that nobody would ever dare to think about using nuclear weapons against China first.
For example, the Times of London ran some stories saying that Chinese female spies are going to Silicon Valley to seduce or marry American tech billionaires to steal American tech secrets. What are your comments on that?
There is something interesting. Sometimes Chinese really do not pick up the phone to answer. Why? I think China knows what the United States wants to say. And by not talking to you, I'm showing my attitude. I know what you want to talk about, and I do not want to talk to you.
And one thing really struck many of the observers was one of the top goals was to strengthen strategic deterrence force, which is nuclear force, to ensure global strategic balance and stability. And meanwhile, President Trump actually talked about vow to restart the nuclear test and all this. My question is, are we entering into a new era of nuclear race? And what kind of response we would be expecting from China's side?
Well, I would not say we're going to enter into a nuclear race, but some people have said we're entering into another nuclear age. Yeah? In terms of Trump's remarks, all what he said were wrong. All what he said were wrong. First of all, no country is conducting nuclear test. Secondly, if a nuclear test is to be conducted, it is not by the War Department, it's by Energy Department, right? And the third thing is, the United States cannot do it immediately. It has to be prepared for at least 2 years, 2 to 3 years, yeah? So the last thing is, people don't know what he's talking about. Is he really talking about underground nuclear test? Or is he testing actually the missiles that can carry nuclear warheads? So for a president, that is all wrong on this kind of most alarming statement. I really don't know how to comment, but these are the facts, right? And in terms of China's latest statement, there is something new there. I believe this is something new that I have never heard about, yeah? Just to strengthen China's strategic, yeah?
Yes.
The force. That I would interpret as a clear instruction to increase China's nuclear force, yeah? So, but as to how many are considered to be enough, we in China never talk about that. We never talk about number. But according to CIPRI and the Washington, to Pentagon, we had 600 nuclear warheads by the end of last year, yeah, against more than 5,000 of the United States and Russia. Oh, by the way, this is not a flattery to my Russian friends, but Trump is also wrong to consider United States is the country that has the largest nuclear arsenal. It's Russia. Yeah, Russia has more than, because all these figures are estimation. Theoretically, Russia has 350 more, yeah, than the United States. So I believe China will increase its nuclear force. Why is that? Because PLA is trying to modernize its military. So everybody see how PLA Air Force is developing, Navy is developing, and even to a great extent how our ground force is developing. So how come we would leave our, nuclear force behind? There's no reason for us to do that, right? So, and even in the past, we talk about make PLA nuclear force to be strong and effective. Oh, to be small and effective. How small? There's no figure. And how effective? Effective means you also need to modernize it. You just cannot do maintenance work, right? So it also indicates a kind of moderate increase. So I believe China's nuclear force will continue to grow. Then to what extent? My answer is very simple. To the extent that nobody would ever dare to think about using nuclear weapons against China first. That's my simple answer. And is anybody thinking about that? Yes. Even Albert Corby, the Deputy American Secretary of Defense, talked about it before, talking about a scenario in Taiwan Strait in which the United States has to use nuclear weapons first, because some people, actually a lot of people in the United States, fear that they are already losing, the advantage in a conventional warfare, over the PLA. So that's why these kind of talks are found. And why they never talk about it to Russia? This is a question I ask myself. Why they never talk about using nuclear weapons against Russia? Look at this war in Ukraine. Russia actually has made a number of thinly-veiled hints on using nuclear weapons. They never talk about it directly, but they did make hints. And these hints have worked. They have deterred NATO from deploying any troops on Ukrainian soil. And this strategy is typically described as to escalate before de-escalate, right? So this strategy has worked. So if I just, as a PLA veteran, if I look at this war, I would say I would have to compare Chinese military and the Russian military, yeah? And then these are the facts, okay? I'm not saying which one is strong. Chinese military is the largest military in the world. China's defense budget is 3 times bigger than Russia's, although we are 1/4 of American, right? And China has all types of weapons available. So probably China probably doesn't have what President Putin said, cruise missile with a nuclear engine or reactor. That is something that Russia has not announced. Besides, it's very hard for you to tell me that the Chinese military is necessarily inferior to Russia. Yeah, I know my Russian friends are here, but this is my honest answer. China even has a 3 aircraft carrier now. Yeah, Russia has 1. So then why the United States never talk about a direct war against Russia? I think that is because of Russia's nuclear weapon. But then remember one thing: having an increased number of nuclear warheads, but still you can have no first use policy. This is different. So, for example, China constantly asks for countries, including Russia and the United States, to adopt this no first use policy. These are 2 different things. I don't believe China will change its no first use policy.
Right. Thank you. And we have seen, besides the first time China showing its nuclear triads and the new ICBM, Dongfeng 5C and all that, another thing that struck many people's eye was China's demonstration of its smart force, the drones, the UAVs and all that. And in the same document, it always talk about China should continue to push for new domain forces and unmanned intelligent combat forces. Tell us about your assessment of who China and the US, we are not talking about anyone else, who is leading on these 2 fields which are regarded as the most determinant factors that will decide a future war?
My answer to you is very simple. In the future, China and Russia would be the dominating countries making full use of AI in modern warfare.
Not US?
China and the US.
Oh, China and the US.
Both China and the US. Why is that? You see, right now in the international arms sales, United States, France, Russia, and China. But the war between India and Pakistan tells us nowadays it's not only that you buy a few aircraft, you have to buy the whole system. And in the future, only 2 countries would be the leading countries in AI. That is China, that is the United States. Have you ever heard much progress about AI development in Europe? No. Not in Japan? No, right? So that is how in the future, I believe China will dominate that. I published an article in South China Morning Post, and I could not see that Indonesia has made the decision, right? Yeah, so even if they buy Rafale, for example, if they have decided to buy Rafale now, and probably in 5 years' time, all the Rafale will be delivered. And then it probably will take another 5 years to them to be trained on Rafale. And in 10 years' time, probably 30% of aircraft are already unmanned. And what's the use of the Rafale?
Okay, my last question, I promise. Anti-corruption. We have seen a string of high-level generals who fell under the sword of the disciplinary investigators, and many people talk about the promotion of General Zhang Shengming, who is a disciplinary head, and he's promoted to the China CMC's deputy. What's the political message behind that? And in the fourth plenum document, they always say that the PLA will need to embark on its movements to advance its budget management reform and its military procurement system improvement and improve evaluations and all that. Does it mean that while PLA is pushing a lot on its hardware side, which it has shown remarkable results, but at the software side, at the control side, it's still lagging behind?
Well, you just cannot prove that, you see, because China has enjoyed peace for more than 4 decades. We don't have a war. And I actually have read something many times. They say because of the corruption found in PLA, so therefore their weapon systems are not so reliable. I think there are two different things. You see, last year we testified at ICBM into the Southern Pacific. It seems to be all right, right? So as far as corruption is concerned, I would say it is very sad, to see so many senior generals, disciplined. But then I saw it in another way. Because the PLA is not in a vacuum. They are just part of the whole society. So on our TV every day, almost every day, you will see some very big names, are caught in trouble. So that means I could interpret it this way. So for civilians or for the military, actually the central government is having the same policy. That is zero tolerance. If you have a problem, no matter how important you are, you'll be prosecuted, So that is exactly what is happening. But of course, I wish this would never happen. But this could also be seen as a kind of effort to clean the body, to make yourself healthy,
Would that affect PLA's war readiness towards all the major strategic missions like Taiwan and all that? Because there have been lots of observers arguing that when some senior figures is taken away, then a body of knowledge is gone.
I think that would, to some extent, discourage people's morale, right? But for a moment, because these people will be replaced very soon. So because we have not really entered into war, I don't believe that will really affect our combat capability. Because the truth is, we are doing more and more joint exercises, right? And we're rehearsing all kinds of scenarios, right, for the West situation. So I don't think that would be a decisive element.
Okay. I've seen you raise your hand third time. Please identify yourself and...
I was the chief economist for Warburg and for Rothschilds, out here for a few years. 2 questions. The first one is, can you hear me?
Yeah.
That's the second question now. Is the Taiwan, there's a lot of concern here in Hong Kong whether this takeover is going to be what I call overt, which is nasty military boots on the ground, or what I myself am wondering whether it could be covert, which is what Napoleon did to Corsica. He turned off the water, surrounded it, no water, no food, no electricity, cyber attacks, and that's then kind of a done deal. That could be done in one night. And I don't know if it were to come to that, given what you were saying before, if there were to be a proper takeover, which I don't think might be necessary anyway, but if there were, would it be a covert or an overt, do you think?
Do you want the second question to come together?
Maybe just a straightforward answer, yeah.
Please,
Well, you see, I was never, in the operation department, but according to my common sense of a PLA veteran, for any operation to happen, normally there are quite a few plans, plan A, B, C, D, or it could be a combination of all these plans. Yeah. So if and these plans, are widely talked about in Western media, so on and so forth. But even these kind of plans could be top secrets for us, right? So for us to speculate, it's meaningless. Yeah. So I think I definitely believe we should have quite a few plans, but these plans definitely will change, because if we're not doing it now, then for example, if you have 3 or 4 plans, in a few years' time, definitely they will change. So nobody knows.
The second one, which we will know even less about, is Thucydides' trap and its applicability to China-U.S. relations. Shan Wei-Jun wrote a very useful leader in the South China a couple of days ago, where he's basically questioning whether this very Western concept put forth by Graham Allison is applicable to an Eastern mindset. Okay, now what he is saying in simple talk is that yes, we kind of figured out that China's a rising power. I mean, if anybody here doesn't know that, then kind of leave. But what he's saying is that must it be this Thucydides trap, or is it maybe not just a different way of working China-U.S. competitiveness from the Chinese angle, which is frankly in my mind much more subtle than this American, where I'd lived for many years, go football game on Monday morning.
Okay.
So is this a Thucydides trap applicable, and then the operational side of it?
No.
Okay.
Thucydides has not coined this trap. Graham Allison coined this trap. It's a Graham Allison trap, yeah? Because Thucydides, what Thucydides has really said are actually 3 reasons for wars, which I believe: honor, fear, and interests. If we are going to have a war in Taiwan Strait, right? So which applies most? The first one, honor. Because as I have explained, China simply cannot afford to have a part still, separated. So this is interesting, you see, how much honor play in human beings. In 19th century, if you and I have a disagreement, we could have a duel over something which is totally insignificant nowadays. But at that time, both of us would take it very seriously, because I think you are damaging my honor, and I would defend my honor with my own life. So this issue primarily is about honor. So of course there are also some interests, right? Some people say, okay, with Taiwan taken back, then Chinese aircraft carrier may just have a better seaport on the east side. Of course that is true. But first and foremost, it's an honor issue, I would say.
Right, so I was actually going to go more to the China-U.S. relation, whether this Thucydides trap is applicable in its simplicity to the China-U.S. relations. Must America beat up on China because China wants to rise and power America? That's kind of the...
Well, the fact is, I don't know how many countries are like China in history. But indeed, China's rise has been peaceful. Yeah? And this is miraculous. This is not easy for a country. So in theory, we could suggest that China could continue because China's rise is already given. Yeah, it's no longer an issue of whether China is rise or not. China has already rise, but the question is, what is developed and fully raised China is going to do? Yeah, so I don't believe that China and the U.S. Will come into conflict just because China is getting stronger, but we do have these two issues. The first is unintended collision, which is dangerous. The second issue is whether the United States wants to become involved or not. So the American side actually has a better answer for you. I can't answer.
The military-industrial complex does.
Sorry?
The military-industrial complex does.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Any other questions? Sorry, I can't see you, but please identify yourself.
Hello, I'm To Han Shi, a Singaporean freelance journalist. Recently, the British newspapers have been, some British newspapers and some British politicians have been playing up fears and stories about Chinese spies, in the UK and America. For example, the Times of London ran some stories saying that Chinese female spies are going to Silicon Valley to seduce or marry American tech billionaires to steal American tech secrets. What are your comments on that?
I really don't know, you see. Yeah. Because I simply cannot be in a position to answer this question. Yeah, if our people are really as good as I described, I'm proud of them. Right.
Lovely answer. Anyone else? Please.
Hi, name is Richard. I'm actually born in mainland China, but spent almost 10 years in Hong Kong here. So my question is, you see, within the last month, you have the USS Nimitz losing 2 airplanes into the South China Sea, and then you have the USS Truman on the U.S. Navy anniversary still, damaged and unrepaired on the one side, and then you have you have the Fujian aircraft carrier going into service today, and then you have all the new military equipment showing up in the parade as well on the Chinese side. So with this sort of a shift in terms of the conventional forces, of course, on the other side, the U.S. still owning 11 aircraft carriers and also a large conventional forces, but there's sort of a trend within social media for onshore China. People are saying we're surpassing the U.S. in terms of conventional forces, both in terms of combat readiness and then also effectiveness. And then you have the U.S. using the USS Nimitz instead of another aircraft carrier doing the show of force in the South China Sea.
Question.
Yes, you have sort of this thing shifting. Do you think is sort of the ruse from the U.S. side trying to play into the sentiment of the onshore Chinese, or is there actually a strategic or structural shift within the conventional military power between these two, and does it actually lead to more instability within the region you mentioned, like the South China Sea and then also the Taiwanese Strait?
Well, you see, it's common sense, for any naval officers to understand. For one warship to work, it needs to have 2 ships to back up. So only 1 in 3 ships can actually work. The United States is suffering a problem of not having enough ships, to operate anywhere in the world. So China's naval ships is the largest in the world. Here, quantity has a quality of its own, right? But what you said reminds me of an article actually I've written in my book. It happened a few years ago too. Quite a few American ships have problem of colliding with something. And what is the result? What is the finding? The finding is that they are too tired. And they work overtime. So if they work overtime, then they need some good rest, right? And why don't you stay away from the water, which you do not claim sovereignty? and let your sailors have some better rest. Yeah? To be less provocative, then you probably won't have so many incidents of your own.
Edith?
Hi, Edith Terry, writer and editor. I just have a very simple question. Mill-mill relations between the U.S. and China have been stalled or suspended now for a number of years. And over last week, Hegseth, the Secretary of War of the U.S., said that mill-mill relations would be renewed. Now, what do you make of that? I know that the people in the consulate here have not had very much to do for a number of years handling those sorts of relationships, even at a lower level.
Well, this sounds too familiar, for me, because the complaint often comes from the United States that the Chinese side do not want to talk to the American side, and the Chinese do not want to pick up the phone, or when the American side wants to talk to someone, there's nobody, answering the phone call, something like that, right? But from Chinese side, we never ever said that this relationship is suspended. And that might not be true in your definition, but it shows that our description shows that we believe we're still in a normal relationship. Yeah? So you have to look at this. And so even after Nancy Pelosi's visit, we have a suspended, with quite a few announcements. But the Ministry of Defense in China still refused to say that this relationship is severed. So there is different understanding. But indeed, this is the fact that Americans want to talk more than Chinese would wish. Yeah? So if I look at the Cold War history, no matter how many problems we had between two enemies, they keep on talking with one another. That is something different. But when it came to China is different, I would say. But I think I'm wondering about this because I wrote my article, which is found in my book in my essay that was published in Foreign Affairs. I encourage China to talk more. My slogan is, Cold War's slogan is trust but verify, right? Verify what? Verify the number of nuclear warheads. Because the Soviet Union and the United States basically had equal number of nuclear warheads, so they need to verify. But between China and the United States, there's no need for us to verify nuclear warheads because we're having much smaller nuclear arsenal. But we need to what? Trust but talk. That means because we do not trust each other, so we need to build a habit of talking to one another. So I'm one of those who actually encourages this kind of talking more often, between the two militaries. But then sometimes there is something interesting. Sometimes Chinese really do not pick up the phone to answer. Why? I think China knows what the United States wants to say. And by not talking to you, I'm showing my attitude. I know what you want to talk about, and I do not want to talk to you. This is just like a wife doesn't want to talk to her husband sometimes, right? After a quarrel, the wife just was silent, for 3 days. I refuse to talk to my husband. But the husband, of course, knows what the wife is thinking, right?
Ladies first, then Kim-Ming. Venus first. Yeah.
A question from a journalist from a local Chinese newspaper. After Xi and President Trump meeting in the Korean, the Trump has said that during his term, Beijing will not attack Taiwan. So since Trump's term lasts until 2029, does this mean Xi will seek another term at the 21st Party Congress in 2027? Thank you.
Well, you see, when Trump says something, especially when he says, who said something, I'm not sure. Yeah, the person he mentioned really said something. Yeah, just like the example I have given to you in one paragraph, it's totally flawed. Yeah, with the facts. So I just cannot comment on that because this has to be very serious. Did President Xi really told him all these kind of things? Chinese media has no report, and I'm in no position, to know that. It's just as simple as that. Yeah.
Kimmy?
Thank you. I apologize for asking an off-topic question. I know Hong Kong is tiny and insignificant in today's discussion, but since you are sitting in Hong Kong, we are in Hong Kong, do you care to share with us your views on Hong Kong after all the last several years, the changes? Thank you.
This is domestic politics, right? Which I normally do not talk about. I think Hong Kong suffered a few years ago, especially during COVID, right? I actually do not come to Hong Kong so often. That's very interesting, because I often would go to Singapore. Singapore would nowadays host different meetings of all sorts, but I don't believe, apart from South China Morning Post, I don't believe I have met many experts on international relations in Hong Kong. Somebody told me we do not have many experts on international relations in Hong Kong. Yeah? But when I came here, I talked to people. It seems that people's confidence has largely resumed, to a greater extent, and even stock exchange, everything is coming back. So I'm absolutely a layman about Hong Kong, but it seems to me that Hong Kong's future definitely now is fully integrated with the rest of China, and I believe China. Then basically the question is about China. China, had some economic, problem, but I believe the Chinese economy is still growing, and the people's confidence in China is still there, and I even have good hope for South China Morning Post. Why is that? Because South China Morning Post is next to none when it comes to coverage on China. Why William told me just now that this newspaper is booming? Because people believe that China is just moving ahead. So more and more people want to know more about China, so they want to read the South China Morning Post. The same is true with Hong Kong. I'll give you two examples. One is Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Mm-hmm. Another is BRICS, right? Both are expanding. There are a lot of people knocking on the door. Why is that? I think it is just like a train that has already moved. Actually, people don't know where it is moving, but everybody is afraid to be left behind. I must catch the train. That is the popularity of these two organizations.
So, final question and final remarks. I want to ask you very simply, should the world fear China, and what's your answer and why? Coming back to the book.
I have written 102 articles to answer this simple question, and you want me to say why. Well, my answer definitely is no. I think I do not want to talk about China being a Pacific country. China is a peace-loving country. Peace and justice are just on everybody's lips, and it depends on really how you define it, right? But if we look at the history of People's Republic of China, you see, after People's Republic of China was founded, China basically would have a war with its neighbor in every decade before 1977. Yeah? With India, with Vietnam, with America in Caribbean Peninsula. But after 1979, China has entered no war with anyone. And if you look at the PLA overseas, there is something common. PLA overseas is just doing three things: counter-piracy, disaster relief, and peacekeeping. What is common in these three operations is that they're all humanitarian in nature. It's not accidental. It's a deliberate choice. China just wants to be focused on these humanitarian areas. And nobody would disagree about the importance of these kind of things. But many people would disagree on the war in Afghanistan, in Iraq, right, which has cost so many people's life. So it's miraculous that it PLA has not killed even a single foreigner anywhere in the world in the last 4 decades and past. Yes, 20 Indian soldiers and 4 Chinese soldiers died, in 2020, but that's a deadly blow. And that is on the question of sovereignty. Elsewhere, China has not killed even a single foreigner. So if you compare that with what the US has been doing, don't you believe with Chinese you feel safer?
您刚刚看到的是2025年11月7日，周波大校在香港外国记者会接受访谈的问答环节。周波大校的履历非常丰富，他于1979年参军，曾在空军和中国国防部担任多个职务。他目前是清华大学国际安全与战略中心的高级研究员，同时也是南华早报中国论坛的专家。周波大校拥有英国剑桥大学的硕士学位，并曾在哈佛大学、澳大利亚陆军战争研究中心和中国多所国防院校研修。在这场坦率、信息量密集的问答中，周波大校直面了西方媒体在军事和地缘政治方面的一系列尖锐提问。在核竞赛问题上，他坦率地确认中国正在扩大其核武库，并称这是一个明确指示。他解释，这样做的目标是建立绝对的威慑力，确保没有人敢首先使用核武器。他特别指出，有美国前高官已经公开讨论过这种首先使用的情景。他还以乌克兰战争为例，指出俄罗斯的核威慑已经奏效，并反问为什么美国从不敢谈论对俄这个核大国动武。在人工智能战争方面，他直言未来只有中美两国能主导，并直率地评价：你在欧洲听说过人工智能有多少进展吗？没有。日本？没有。对于台湾问题，他给出了一个非常规的定义。他认为这首先是一个荣誉问题，而非利益问题，其神圣性如同19世纪的决斗。他强调，佩洛西访台后，现状已经改变且不可逆转。而他认为，确保和平的唯一途径就是让中国政府相信和平统一仍然可能。当被问及中美军事沟通为何中断时，他给出了一个生动的比喻。他称，中方有时不接电话，是因为中国知道美国想说什么，这是一种表明态度的外交手段，就像妻子的沉默。他还谈到了解放军的反腐运动，承认高级将领的落马令人难过，但他认为解放军并不在真空中，这是全社会零容忍政策的体现。最后，在回答世界是否应该害怕中国时，他给出了一个基于历史的反问：中国自1979年以来未与任何人开战，在过去40年里没有在世界任何地方杀死过一个外国人。他总结道：如果你把它与美国一直在做的事情相比较，你难道不觉得和中国在一起你更安全吗？我们渴望在评论区听到您对这场坦率对话的见解。如果您认为本期内容对你有价值，请点赞、评论、分享、订阅我们的频道。感谢您的观看。